Anyway, I'm gonna give this to Michelle, and let me put your spotlight, Michelle, and please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hello to all of the people that are watching us right now. My name is Michelle Angela Ortiz. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. For the past 20 years, I've been doing work in communities, really about focusing on how public space, public artworks can amplify the voices of the community, and specifically communities that don't necessarily have the platform or the space to speak about their stories, the change that they want to see, or even just their dreams. And so the work that I've been doing for the past 20 years has been really about developing trust and relationships, developing ways to engage the community in a very authentic way that is really focused on having the community take their own agency in how they want to share their stories, and also finding ways in which the art, in whatever shape or form, whether it's murals or projections, temporary installations, films, that basically becomes the vessel in which those stories can be told. And so for me, it's also in terms of the activism part and social change, you know, anytime we open space and give the valuable space that communities deserve and should always have as a human right, to share their stories, that it's really important to continue to do that as an artist and open those spaces for communities to speak on their own. And I feel that it really comes down to my own personal upbringing. I'm speaking to all of you from my little block where I actually was born and raised in South Philadelphia. And it's really a pleasure to be able to be still in my home and then still be connected to the rest of the world during the quarantine. I think one of the things that have been really interesting around these past 6 months, especially, you know, what we're dealing with COVID and just the pandemic all throughout the world. For me personally, as an artist that's been always traveling and moving around, Philly's my home. I always come back to Philadelphia. And specifically South Philly, where my parents are still here, and I'm raising my son, and my husband is with me. And so for me, it's really important to, you know, to just travel and do work in other communities. And usually, I don't think I've spent this much time in my house since I was on maternity leave when I gave birth to my son. So it has been interesting, and just like, again, adjusting in the way of a lot of reflection, understanding that my value is not placed on productivity. It's actually placed on how I take care of myself, how I hold my house and my home and my spaces as sacred spaces. How is it that I'm focusing on what I can do at this moment? I think that that's been really something really important, especially for a lot of artists and that have been very much active within the political world, within pushing for social change, as artists that are really utilizing their art as a way to advocate and offer more support and advocacy for the organizers and activists on the ground 24/7 doing this work. I think for me, on a personal level, I felt definitely a bit overwhelmed between the protests, between, you know, what's been happening around just our healthcare system. And now we're in the middle of elections, right? So we're being bombarded by all these messages and campaigns, and the fly on Pence's head. La mosca, we can't forget la mosca. So I think that the other thing too is really about what can we do at this moment, right? Other than vote, right? And holding our elected officials accountable before and after election. But it's also, for me, just thinking about, well, what resources can I share? If I can't be outside protesting, then what can I do where I am, where I stand? And out of that generated a couple of things. One was through David Q, who's also another Philly artist, and he actually reached out to several Philly artists. We created this document called Paint the Street, which is really a open source document for anyone. We can share it later for anyone to access that would like to organize painting on the street. And so I offered some of my information around some of the work that I did through one of my installations through Familias Separadas, which I'll be sharing in a second. And I also, for marches, I was able to share statements and be able to support, especially when arts and cultural funding was eliminated in our city. And so making statements, sharing petitions. And then, you know, in my own community, I live about 2 blocks away from 9th and Montrose, which was where the former Rizzo mural existed, was actually creating a space of cleansing and a space of just presenting positive light within that space. So I think, you know, during this time, it's been a lot of just reflecting, but also being present. And I feel like part of taking care of my spirit is not just sitting in what's happening now, right? But also still holding on to what I want to do in the future. And I think that that helps us reimagine, helps us imagine a change, helps us imagine, you know, that we will be getting out of this. And so what are we learning right now at this moment that's going to help guide us? So what I would like to do for a few minutes before I start chatting it up with Daniel is share and discuss a few projects that I've worked on that have been, that really speak to the activism, social change, and some of the like new steps and new works that I'm doing. So bear with me as I share my screen and get on presenter view to share some images.
I want to play Jeopardy music in between, but
I just wanted to make sure I did this right because Daniel did the, hold on. Here we go. Yes, okay, I got it right. There we go. And sorry about this. Okay. So because, you know, I'm really excited that this is this talk is part of the Day of the Dead celebrations at Fleisher. So as I mentioned before, I live in the neighborhood, not that far from Fleisher either. And Fleisher is very dear to my heart. I was able to teach some classes there, Dibujo Básico, way back when we were thinking of piloting that program, and it's still continuing. I'm really excited about that. And Teen Lounge, when Teen Lounge was just kind of like adapting, and so I've been able to see Fleisher grow, as well as I'm growing with Fleisher too. But because we're celebrating Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, I really do want to talk, make that connection about, you know, where does this all come from, right? And I think for a lot of activists, well, I don't necessarily take that full term activist, you know, in its full entirety, because as I mentioned, organizers and activists are, you know, there are organizers and activists out there that do this 24/7. So I just want to clarify that what I do as an artist is really find ways, creative strategies, and utilize my artwork as a way to advocate for the organizing efforts that are happening, not just in my own city, but within the many communities that I'm connected to. And I think that it's understanding what the value of my work is and the impact of my work is, along with the waves of work, the movement that still continues to happen in many communities. So I just wanted to start with honoring my grandmother, Maria Dionisia Navarro, who you see here in the center. And my mother is on the left-hand side. That's when she arrived to the United States at age 17, almost close to 50 years ago and settled in Philadelphia. And so with the two women, my uncles on the right-hand side, I just wanted to present this image that, you know, activism or standing up for rights or being acknowledging the rights of others really comes through what I saw in my mother, what I saw in my father, even though they don't necessarily call themselves activists, but when they were in workplaces, when they saw folks that were being treated unjustly, they stood up, right? And so they always fought for their rights and for the rights of others. And for me, that was always something that was so deeply embedded in the work that I was doing as an artist, that I'm doing now as an artist. But I just wanted to honor the ancestors and my family and the people in my family that have helped me really look towards justice as something that we need to continue to fight for, you know, in the most simple way, whether it's gathering through a good meal together and we're strategizing, or whether it is us marching together and fighting for the policy changes that we need to happen. So in speaking about my grandmother, Maria Dionisia Navarro, who we called Mama Icha, a few days ago, she would have turned 100 years old, and she's very present in my life. And so it's really interesting that I took the idea of making paper flowers, something that was very familiar to me. And it was one of the first points of contact that I started working with the mothers that were formerly detained at the Berks Detention Center, which is located about an hour and 45 minutes from Philadelphia. It is the first detention center that holds and incarcerates families. So it is a family prison. And it is the first of three. The other two are in Carnes and Dilly. And a lot of people in Pennsylvania, even in Philadelphia, don't even know that this prison still exists and continues to incarcerate families. And so, and I'll speak to the work of the Shut Down Berks Coalition in a second. So it is actually through the Shut Down Berks Coalition that I was able to, which was my community partner for phase 2 of Familias Separadas, which was a project and continues to be a project that focuses on amplifying the stories of families that are directly impacted by detention and deportation. And this particular project was Flores de Libertad. And so I took the concept of making the flowers, because I was able to come into the prison with paper and pens. I couldn't really bring a lot of art supplies. This is just one detail of one of the flowers that the mothers created. And a lot of the mothers that I interviewed and that I came in contact with were coming mostly from El Salvador and from Honduras. And so based on the conversations that we've had, and they began to write messages of freedom on these flowers that then turned into 1,600 hand-dyed flowers that were installed in front of the gates of City Hall. And so one thing that I think about in terms of artistic imagination is really about how we move through public space. You know, how is it that we claim ownership over our city? How important it is for these messages of the mothers to travel outside of the confines of a prison and be able to be spread out in this way of a statement of libertad and liberty. Shortly after, when we did this creative action, the Shut Down Berks Coalition did a press conference that was then a moment in which they could share what were the demands that they have and continue to have to Governor Wolf to be able to shut down the detention center. And so I felt that it was also really important to have that image of libertad when we have all these images of freedom and democracy in the city of Philadelphia. What does that mean for our undocumented communities? What does it mean for asylum seekers, for mothers and fathers seeking safety in our state, in our country? Familias Separadas is the most extensive project that I've done that has been pretty continuous. I started in 2013 And most people in Philadelphia would know and recognize some of these installations. These were highlighting some of the stories of families like Maria, where I placed her image right in the Compass Rose in City Hall. And the Compass Rose is a permanent public artwork, and it marks the center of our city. So what I visually did was really place Maria in the center of our city, so that we are paying attention to, if we really claim to be a sanctuary city, how are we eliminating ICE, no presence of ICE? How are we securing the families that are continue to live and contribute to the livelihood of our city? And so the connection too of just Eres mi todo is the title of the piece, and those are that's the actual recreation of the writing of Maria's husband, who was detained in California for 3 years and then was deported back to Mexico after he was detained because he was trying to attempt to come back to Philadelphia to be reunited with his family. This is his son standing by the words of his father and the letters that he would send to Maria. So my thought is, like, again, it's playing with public space. It's understanding, you know, the love statue where everybody's taking selfies and images. How does that relate to the Te Amo necklace that Suyapa, who also was in sanctuary for 2 years and was finally released, was carrying that necklace when she crossed. And so she speaks to what happens. The question is, like, for her, what she would say is, what happens to love when you're forced to leave? I will move forward with this, and this was the installation that I did in front of the immigration, the ICE building here in Philadelphia on 16th and Callow Hill. So these were pieces that were created in 2015. They're not all the installations, but this was particularly created, and I'll play the video, particularly created with close to 30 families, volunteers, allies, immigration organizers, activists. And for phase 1, I worked in partnership with Juntos, and through Juntos I was able to connect with some of the families, but they were also able to open the space for community members to come and be able to help create this huge 90-foot long stencil that actually reads, "We are human beings risking our lives for our families and our future." And these are the words of a mother that was also formerly detained at Berks. So this image was, the view that you see here is actually the view of the ICE agents looking down on us as we were installing the work. And so what's really important is, again, changing the space that represented so much fear, but we were together in community creating these words and amplifying the voice of the mother, the Ana, who is represented here in this piece. Phase 2 was actually created in 2018, and I focused in Harrisburg. So I went from 2015 working with 5 families in Philadelphia to then amplifying the stories of families that were detained at the Berks Detention Center. And I focused on families that had been detained for close to 2 years with their young children. And so there were a series of billboards like this one as you entered into Harrisburg. So Harrisburg is the capital of our state, obviously, but it's also where our governor works. And it was intentional in bringing the voices and the presence of the mothers and their children in the spaces where the policymakers can actually issue an ERO and can also take action in shutting down this family prison. And so these billboards and were all created with, you know, based on some of the discussions. If you see the pattern behind me, it's coming from this design here. And they're all of the text that you see in each one of the billboards are coming directly from the families and the interviews that later developed into a 30-minute documentary. So these were the, so I showed you the billboards. These are the bus shelters that are directly across from the Capitol steps. And this was the 88-foot long installation of the eyes of Karen and Stephen. Karen was one of the 10 out of the 14 families. 10 families were deported back to Central America after being detained at this family prison for 2 years. And her son Stephen had 2 suicide attempts while he was at Berks, only at the age of 6 years old. And so this trauma that is still inflicted on families continues to happen. Again, not just across the country, but specifically in our state through this family prison. And so I was able to do this installation, probably on the last person to do this installation, the first and the last. I was in good trouble, right? I was able to install the image of Karen and her son, Stephen. And in conjunction with the unveiling of that installation, there were 8 installations. So the bus shelters, the billboards, and then I also created this 30-foot tall mural of Delmi, who's one of the mothers featured in the film. What you see here is Mi hijo es el único que me da fuerza. It's the writing of Delmi speaking to her son and her freedom. And my son is the only one that gives me strength. And so the idea was that we would march from the Capitol steps, which was about a 10-minute walk, to Allison Hill. And Allison Hill is a community that has been targeted by both ICE raids by local and state police. It is a community that has African Americans, Latinx community, and a very large undocumented community. And so having the image of Delmi and her son present with those words is meant to inspire and to give strength and to, if anything, give strength to the resilience that these families in the community continues to have, and so continue to have in this particular community. And so with the creation of this mural, I'm not going to play this because we don't have enough time, but this is a little clip from the documentary, and you'll be able to see, if we have enough time in the end, I can share it. Daniel can let me know. But this is a little clip from the actual documentary. What I want to share is that Delmi lost her life a month later from due to a tragic event. And this was the last time that I was able to see her. And the 4 mothers that are featured in the film were all living in different states and cities and outside of Pennsylvania. And I was able to convince Delmi and her son to come the day of the dedication. And she was able to march with us and see all the people that were fighting for her freedom when she was inside. So at the age of 25, she lost her life. And this was a moment that I try to hold on dear to, because she had said to me, Michelle, me hiciste tan grande, Michelle, you made me so large. And I said, oh, I made you as grand and as large as you are. And so the power of just feeling represented, feeling valued. So many people would come up to us when we were painting this mural, when I would speak to incarceration, when I'd speak to family separation, even folks who are documented Americans, right, who had fallen into the system of mass incarceration, spoke about, oh, I haven't seen my child for 5 years, or I'm trying to reconnect with my family. The impact of that family separation still continues. And so there were so many people who identified and connected with this work, but I was so happy to have this moment with Delmi for her to see and to witness the greatness that I see in her, obviously, and also that the mural and her words are now a memorial to her story, and is still a memory that still lives. So what is next is what I'm sharing is that Las Madres de Berks finally is now accessible to the public, and there are ways in which depending on numbers of uses, folks will be able to access the film. And there's also a guide that I was able to create with Candy Gonzalez, who's Miami born, but Philly based artist here, and also Selena Almazar. And so the facilitator's guide is really around how to facilitate discussions around the issues presented within the film, and also provide more information. So through the Shutdown Burkes Coalition, I was able to create several resources that are shared not just in the guide, but also on the website, lasmadresdeburkes.com, in ways in which people can take action. If people want to know the history around the Burkes Family Prison, they're able to learn about it. And also they can use it, for organizing efforts, or for education, or for, again, policy reform. Where we are now is that Familias Separadas is expanding thanks to an amazing national grant through the Art for Justice Fund. I'm able to expand Familias Separadas, and we are targeting spaces very similar to Burkes, detention communities, counties, and detention counties where detention centers exist and still impact families, undocumented families within those communities and counties. And so we are expanding out to Tacoma, Washington, Washington State, that is, Dover, New Hampshire, and Raleigh, which is Wake County, North Carolina. So if you know any artists out there, please share this call for artists with them, because the idea, and I can speak to that around how am I still doing my work under the quarantine and having the impact, is by expanding my artistic team. That's the way I'm able to do that at this moment. And I'll just wrap up with some of the new work that I'm working on. Is I'll show you the images first. This was a projection that I did on 9th and Montrose, which is called Cleanse. And the projection opened with the hands of my mother, who worked in the market for 25 years. My mother, as I mentioned, came from Colombia, Momposina from La Costa, came to Philadelphia at the age of 17. Had worked for Giordano's, one of the Italian families in the 9th Street area, and she worked for them for 25 years, and cleaning and cooking, and so I opened my scene with Cleanse. There were a number of projections of about four to five other artists that we were able to respond to this concept of cleanse. And so what does it mean to fill a space of darkness with light and positivity, especially in this moment? How do we honor and expand the space for more stories to be included, specifically in my neighborhood, and in not just South Philly or Bella Vista, but just in the 9th Street market. And having the opening of this projection, which was really on one day, 1 hour, that we were able to offer it, having my mother, the opening scene be my mother's hands in the ponchera, which is the huge bowl that she would actually carry on her head. Not this exact one, but she would carry on her head selling food in Mompos. And so having that present here and using that as a symbolism of cleansing, of really opening the space for new possibilities. And the end scene of my projection ends with the hands of my husband holding my son, Amado, but really about representing a Black man, not in pain, not in conflict, but actually loving and nurturing and caring for his child, and doing that in our community and in our neighborhood. So I'll play Cleanse, which is a short recap that was created by Laura Deutsch, was one of the other artists, along with Ursula Rucker, Naomi Joven, Kevin Wynn. The Cleanse team includes Paul Farber from the Monument Lab, and also Ricardo Rivera from Clip Collective and Lori Walschuk from Philadelphia Photo Arts Center. And so we all kind of organically came together and said, okay, what can we do at this moment? And this was one of our responses, and I can add more to our conversation. So I'll just play this now. Okay.
Well, I feel like I need to applaud. Thank you. That was terrific.
Thank you.
Amazing presentation. And I had to say that I hope you're getting into good trouble, like you said.
Oh yeah, of course. Thanks to John Lewis, inspired by him.
Well, Daniel, I'm gonna give it to you now, and you can ask away.
Thank you, Gerard, and thank you, Michelle. Really, it's incredible the number of different themes and images that you're able to bring together in your practice. It's really so rich, and so it's hard to quite decide what kind of tone to set in our discussion, and I also want to make sure to leave some room for folks in the audience to ask some questions. And so I'll start with one and we'll see where it leads. And then if there's time for more, we'll do more. But I think that, when I think about the kind of lessons that can be learned from your practice for other artists, other practitioners, so many of us feel kind of stretched thin in a lot of ways, especially these days, juggling lots of commitments and aspects of our lives. But something that I see in your practice really strongly, especially in the kind of arc of the projects that you shared tonight, is that you're really gifted at stitching opportunities together and kind of weaving them together and making them add up to something bigger. And I think that for a lot of artists, they feel pulled in different directions. Like, I've got an exhibit over here, I'm teaching a class over here, how do I make it all add up? And so I guess I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about, kind of how you reconcile that and kind of find a solution to not be pulled in so many directions, and what advice you have to share for artists who are juggling lots of commitments but want to scale up their impact over time.
That's a really great question. I would say that I don't have the full answer to that because I'm always still juggling. People might not see that on the outside, but I think for me, it's really so one thing is that once I finish one project, it helps inform what the next steps are, and I think that listening to that and taking a moment to reflect, like, what worked, what didn't work, where do I want to put my energy in. Right now, I have, I'll show you so that you know that I'm not lying. I seriously have this in front of my desk where I have, like, what is my intention, vision, and I want joy, impact, and healing to be at the forefront of my work, right? And I think every year, or, you know, sometimes even at the end of because, you know, when you finish your projects, and for artists out there that are like, okay, I just worked on this project for 6 months or for a year, you're literally just birthing something new, right? And so to then just go right into the next thing doesn't allow for that space to really think about, well, what really worked here? What brought me joy? What really brought joy to others? What was able to have the impact that it needed, right? And I feel that especially now at this time where I'm in my home, it's, you know, Cleanse was really organic and really beautiful because it was, okay, this is what we can do at this moment and at this scale, right? And how can we put our skills together? And that was with practically zero budget and in a matter of 2.5 weeks of planning, right? So when people see that, they're like, how did that happen? It was really just about a group of artists being eager to want to do something at this moment in this space. But I think for me, in 2013, Familias Separadas was basically unveiled in 2015, but in 2013 was a really critical moment because it was when I was really focused on what I wanted to do, right? And Familias Separadas became that big step forward of saying, okay, if I'm, you know, and just understanding, like, you went way back when I was a more student, I would get my hands into everything: photography, sculpture, printmaking. So I was never, I think, you know, this idea of like, well, I'm just a muralist. I fell into really a muralism and doing mosaics because I always say I'm a small woman and I want to do big things. But it's also something that just I felt more at ease and more comfortable in public spaces versus in galleries or museums. And that was really what brought me to that work that then has expanded, but also just the way that I conduct conversations, how I gather people, how we come together to share our stories. That was definitely developed as I was an art student, but I learned all of those things through my own upbringing in my own community, right? And so when I think about the foundation of my work, it's really combining both of those things, right? What I learned in my house, in my community, and what I've learned within my artistic practice or life, as you can say. But in 2013, it was critical because I had said, okay, what can I do? What if there wasn't a wall? What can I do, right? And prior to that, I already been experimenting on, I did an installation of awnings in 2011 in the market. And so it's really like thinking about other materials, ways to engage people. So I would just say a lot of, not just grant writing, but I think there's been opportunities, for example, when I have done, did my documentary and I reached out to someone who I had supported my work. And so I really wanted to see if there was a way to be able to garner support through that. So I think for me, it's like being focused, and the shorter answer is being focused, reflecting, giving yourself time to reflect on the work that you're doing, and taking that risk, you know, and maybe that risk is going to take 1.5 years of grant writing to be able to get the funding to kind of take that first step forward. But it definitely is fruitful, because once you do that, then you're able to move into the other project. And in terms of managing, right now for me, it's really about what are the projects that I'm doing that, again, have impact, but also on one thing is something new, and is also a continuation of the work that I'm doing, the development of the work. So Familias Separadas has been definitely a development, and I learn every time. But projects like Cleanse, there's another project that I'm launching called the Our Market Project, which is also centered here in the market, and thinking about ways to really support that work, and being okay with starting small, as long as you know that you are generating the momentum for your projects to evolve in the way that you want them to.
Yeah, thanks for engaging that. I mean, I think that sometimes it can be really daunting for people to think about how do they move from a materially oriented practice of manipulating things to engaging in these kind of larger complicated systems. And I know that one of the ways that you've been able to do that scaling up in addition to your own focus has been through partnerships. And you talked about how key those were for you in the kind of multiple phases of Familias Separadas. And I guess I was just wondering if you could reflect a little bit more about how you have had to kind of at times maybe suspend your identity as an artist to participate fully in social movement work, and at which times it feels kind of seamless, and at which times you have to be much more kind of conscious about who are you in that situation and what are you there to do.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting because we just had this conversation. We were speaking to this with a conversation that I was moderating with Paul Ramirez Jonas and Chanu Beluga about Paul had said, oh, it's like, it's hard because I'm such a control freak. So how do I allow other people, how do I open a space or create a structure for other people to really engage? I think I do have that aspect of being that control freak as well. And so one of the things that I am really, so two things. One, in terms of the partnerships, definitely it is when I reach out to an organization, a group, another artist, or any other person that I'm interested in collaborating with or connecting with or building with, it is the question that I ask myself before approaching anybody else is that person and the practice of their work can be beautiful, but the way that they engage with community, their process with a specific community or theme that I'm trying to really develop, is that in line with my values and my mission as an artist, right? And so the great thing about Juntos, and also with the work that I've done within these now past 2 years with the Shutdown Burkes Coalition, both organizations, and I would say specifically with the Shutdown Burkes Coalition, because I've worked with them longer, is having the community members be at the forefront of telling their own stories. And so for me, it is about acknowledging my own privilege, right? And understanding where I stand as, I can speak the language and I identify as Latinx, but at the same time, I'm not undocumented. I'm not affected directly by detention and deportation in the way that a lot of the communities that I'm engaging with are. And so it's a reality that I am aware of and very sensitive to, and also really for me is I'm invested in creating a safe space, and invested in cultivating that trust. And so the way to do that is really also working with organizers that are doing this work in that way as well. And in my case, and what I tried to do, and I think was definitely more intentional with Familias Separadas, phase 2 with the Mothers at Burkes, was creating a space of healing, a space of being able to connect with the mothers much more than just, hey, let's get together and make this stencil, right? Which was part of phase 1, but the power of installing that stencil, and the power to stand in front of that ICE building, knowing that there were people detained inside and chanting, was extremely emotional and powerful, right? It was like, so I think that, for me, I have like mad respect for organizers and activists, and I'm constantly inspired by the families that are continuing to push forward through all of this. and through the trauma that they're still navigating through. And so when I look at my work, I see it. And so the step back is really about how can my work serve as a tool for advocacy for this continued work of organizing that is happening. A specific example is, when I reached out to the Shut Down Burkes Coalition, I would ask them, like, well, what are some of the efforts that are in place? Once we were on board on working together, was also strategizing when was a good time to unveil the installation. So the installations were unveiled in November 2018, a few days before elections, the re-election of the governor. But that was really strategic to be able to connect with the organizing efforts that they were doing. So what I saw and witnessed in that phase 2 was, okay, at this scale, the work itself becomes a platform for an action, a march, a story, one story or many to be told in this space, right? And that is the direction that I'm moving forward with Familias Separadas 3, where my main community partner is actually a national member organization called Moms Rising, Mamás con Poder, and they have been doing work throughout the nation around immigration. They've been doing work not just around healthcare, workers' rights, all of those things. But the way that Moms Rising works as a national entity, they are helping identify organizers, organizations, or activists on the ground that I can then connect with. So this idea of like, okay, so how am I doing a national project in the middle of a quarantine is about expanding my team and building on the efforts that are happening. And because I have the grant that I was able to receive, I'm able to expand at that level and be able to connect and pay other artists during this time to be able to continue to build on the work that they're doing with immigrant communities in their own cities or in their own counties. So that's part of the work that I'm doing now. And the best way that I can describe it is a web, right? Is that we all need each other. And so it is about people power, and it is also thinking about, obviously for me, is the push of finding the resources to be able to not just pay folks, but also for understanding that payment goes way beyond, like resources go way beyond than just the monetary, right? It's just understanding the network of people and the network of resources that we have in each one of our spaces. So that's what I'm building on right now.
Thanks, Michelle. That's, in addition, I love the image of a web and, beyond it being a web. And I also feel like it's like a civics lesson in, like you start at the local level, then you go to the state level, then it's a federal level. So next, obviously, you're going to do a, multilateral partnership with, the United Nations or Intergalactica or Via Campesina or something, so we got a question in the chat that was sent directly to me, so I'll read it. But it's from Thalia, who asks if you ever experience activist fatigue. Have you experienced it, and how do you push through? And we'll probably have time maybe for one more question after Thalia, so people can put it in the chat or send me a message.
Definitely. I think that once I finished the installations in 2018 in Harrisburg, which was like push, and then in 2019, I spent the whole year doing screenings throughout the state of Pennsylvania for Las Madres de Burkes. And this is another way of like how the film became a tool to not just share the stories of the mothers and have them at the forefront telling their own stories but not being re-traumatized every time they're telling a story. So the film became that tool of sharing their stories as a tool for advocacy, but also partnering with the Schuttenberg's Coalition, which is a statewide coalition, and with local organizers to present the film and teach people ways in which they can take action. And so I think we did about 23 screenings, and we were able to reach out close to 2,000 people. And it was recently broadcasted in WHYY, and we reached 5,000 in one night. And so I'm working on more broadcasting so that we're able to reach out to more people. But definitely the fatigue is there. I think that, yeah, come at the end, 2019 was when the last screening was, and January through February, so right before the quarantine, I was like, okay, I need to rearrange my studio. I need to think about what I'm going to do next. I was applying to grants, not knowing if they were going to come through. And then the quarantine hits in March. And I think I spent most of March and April just focusing on taking care of my family. And I feel like the fatigue kind of also kicks in when, especially in June, which I had to deal with, you know, doing meditation, taking time to do things that you enjoy and love. Thank God I have my now 6-year-old son who's like, Mom, it's time to play. Like, let's go play. And I'm like, okay, I need to play. But taking those moments, and if you don't have that 6-year-old in your life, have that 6-year-old inside of your ear and on your shoulder to tell you this. Because honestly, this idea of like, I need to react, I need to be out there, I need to be marching, you know, it made me also very nervous because I just got out of doing all the screenings, doing the installations in 2018, and I was really feeling mentally and emotionally and spiritually drained. And so the quarantine hit, you know, there's never a good time for the quarantine. But it really was a moment to just hit pause and just take care of myself. And so when I feel the anxiousness, when I feel, you know, that kind of like what I've been thinking about is like mountains, like rising beside me. And then I said, okay, I bought some clay for my son and I started making little semis, which in Puerto Rico are little mountain gods. I'm like, okay, the mountains are in my hands, right? Instead of the mountains climbing up beside me. So beginning to just like visualize and also trusting yourself and just knowing like, so there's two things, trusting yourself, know that whatever problem or obstacle you have in front of you, you're going to resolve. And then I think the other part of it is that this is also a moment for, especially for activists and folks that have been working like nonstop, this is a moment for other people to step up. So how can you help them, right? That was the reason why we did the Paint the Street document. This is why I shared my statements. I spoke with activists in Atlanta and Miami, both artists of color that were doing the Black Lives Matter murals. And I said, look, this is what I can do. I can share with you resources. And I felt good because I felt like, okay, well, I'm not physically out here, but what my knowledge, I can use my brain power to really empower other people to step up. And that's how I've been dealing with it. And also self-care, us loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves is a revolutionary act, especially in a world of capitalism that we live in. So just the act of wellness is extremely important for us to continue to move forward. And for me on a personal level, I'm doing that not just for myself, but I'm teaching my son what it means to take care of himself and how to take care of others. And that is extremely important because that was not something that I was just taught to just work, right? And we also need to take a break and we also need to replenish ourselves and our souls.
I love that activism of taking care of yourself. Everyone should do these.
Everybody should go onto Instagram and follow NAP Ministry because they're amazing. Those are the folks that's coming from them. It's not like, again, it's like learning that language and understanding it. Really, it's like, wow, I never realized that the way that I'm thinking is really around productivity doesn't represent the value of myself and my what is it called, purpose in this world, you know.
Mhm.
And so shifting that again, you know, and I probably was too busy, right? I was too busy and too like moving around to even think that and process that. So that's what I've been able to learn at this moment.
Well, it is 7:30, and I
Oh,
want to say gracias, Michelle. It's been really
thank
fantastic.
you.
And we would love to see you again at some point, because I know you have
Thank
a lot to
you.
share. And
Yes.
yeah, and show us some more of that good trouble you're gonna get into.
Yes, yes. Well, I know we missed that last question, but what I do want to share is for folks that are listening to us that live or reside near the 9th Street Market, there is an event that I'm co-presenting with Orchestra 2001 at the end of this month on October 24th and 25th on 9th Street between Ellsworth and Washington. And the event is called Honoring Our Ancestors. It's part of the Our Market Project, which is around investing in the 9th Street Market, the vendors, neighbors, employees, folks that work along the market. And it's really about, again, expanding those narratives. So honoring our ancestors, for the folks that are listening that might live near the market or along the market, we're asking folks to share an image or a message of a loved one that has passed away that they would like to honor, and it'll be part of the performance. I'll send that message, the information to you,
Yeah,
Geraldo,
please
and then
do.
you can,
Yeah.
okay, and then
Yeah,
you can
I'd love to
share it.
share this with everyone, and everyone
Okay,
can come to this. Yeah, try to
great.
participate, please.
Thank you.
And Daniel, I want to also thank you for being here with us. And Daniel, you're also doing something tomorrow at 5
Yeah.
o'clock, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we go? So.
Yes, certainly. Very quickly, if you go to moore.edu, moore.edu, and look on the calendar, you'll see a program that we're hosting with in partnership with a really exciting organization based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, who are going to be talking about very kind of like-minded graphics campaigns and activism in Argentina, similar to the things that Michelle shared. So their name is Grupo de Arte Callejero, the street art group, and they're going to be in dialogue with Solana Shettiman from The Shed, an arts organization in New York City. This is a partnership with A Blade of Grass and Printed Matter, two organizations also from New York. So the program will be in Spanish and it will be live interpreted in English. And so please tell your friends and check it out. And thanks for letting me plug it.
No?
And thanks so much, Gerard and Michelle, you know, really inspiring work, and look forward to hearing what's next.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.